This is Mike Perkins, and you're listening to the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast.
Greetings, Cap fans, and welcome to episode 23 of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast. I am your host, Rick Verbanis, and as always, I am joined by my partner, Bob Lucius. Howdy, Bob.
Hey, what's going on, Rick?
Well, we've got a great show today because we have coming up soon as our guest, Captain America artist Mike Perkins. Of course, he's known for many other things over the last 2 decades, but that's how we know him, as one of the many artists that worked with Ed Brubaker on Volume 5. And sometimes he was inking Steve Epting, sometimes he was penciling. And so can't wait to talk with him because, you know, we've been talking about his work recently on the Winter Soldier. So this will be interesting to talk with him.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to get some really great insights from him, I think.
Yep. Also, I guess what's going on, we might as well give an update on the Captain America Comic Book Fans Facebook page, right? Cap Madness has been going on. We just finished round 1. And by the time you hear this, we will be a couple days into round 2. So today, I think we have Rick Levins going up against Ron Lim, a couple of 90s Cap artists. Tomorrow, oh boy, Bob. Tomorrow we've got John Byrne going up against Gene Colan.
Oh my.
I know.
Some of these have been really hard, Rick.
I know. And then the next day, we've got Paul Neary against Mike Perkins. So we'll have to ask Mike about that. Battle of the Brits. Oh, and it keeps getting better. Next day, Steve Epting versus Ron Garney. Then we have Frank Robbins versus John Romita Sr. I mean, gosh, it's going to keep getting tougher and tougher as we get through this.
This isn't getting easier, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I will say this has been, if our listeners, if you're not participating in this, A, I don't want to hear you whining later, but B, you're missing out on like the most fun you can have with your pants on. This is way better than basketball. I mean, this is the stuff.
Yeah. Well, you're talking to a bunch of comic geeks. I think we'd all agree with you on that. But I digress. So, yeah, also going on with the Facebook page, we just recently celebrated our 1-year anniversary. Man, it's hard. Time flies, right? When you're having fun. It's hard to believe. April 3rd of 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic, I finally got around to putting this group together because I got tired of every time I wanted to talk about Captain America on Facebook, it was all about the MCU. Don't get me wrong, love the MCU, but man, let's talk about the comics, right? So, finally got around to doing that. Man, what a year it's been.
Yeah. And, you know, I speak for, I was one of those early adopters, Rick, but I think I speak for, we got close to 3,000 folks now in the group. Right. Yep. Mm-hmm. And I think I speak for, the vast majority of them when I say that, this group has been an enormous help over the last year because of everything that we've had to deal with, from a social support sort of standpoint. But the other thing is, I know you've tried really, really hard to make this a positive group, a lot of positive energy, not a sort of place where, folks take pot shots at each other and snipe at creators, but the sort of place where we can enjoy each other's company and have great constructive discussions that you come away with feeling better and more informed than you started with.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that, Bob. I agree. I mean, my vision was always to make this an oasis, right? We got enough stuff going on in our lives, enough stress, enough things that, maybe we want to just forget for a little bit. So that was the thought process behind the page this whole time, was just, let's go get together and talk about something that we love. And I would say for the most part, our members really do a great job with that. So, kudos to everybody there. So, one of the things too, being on the Facebook page is we learn about stuff that we hadn't didn't know we always wanted. And so one of those things I know for you has been you've gotten into statues. And so I just want to give a shout out to my local comic shop, which is Comic Fortress. They're in New Jersey, but I would say for anybody listening, if you are into statues or if you are into busts, maquettes, action figures, anything like that, and it doesn't have to be just Cap, right? I mean, Marvel, DC, Independence, pop culture, any of that stuff. Highly suggest you go to comicfortress.com and check them out. Because you know what else is really hot right now, Bob?
What's that, Rick?
That would be something called Hot Toys. So they've got a huge selection of those on there as well. Yeah. So check them out at comicfortress.com.
I got to tell you, Rick, I live in Florida, right? And you've mentioned Comic Fortress before, and I've checked them out online, and I've seen some stuff I want on there, and the prices are great. And I'm just waiting for a little bit of wallet to my wallet to thicken up before I order a couple things, because they do have a great selection and great prices.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so we've got. Let's get to our guest, Mr. Mike Perkins, and chat with him. Hi, Mike. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. I mean, you've been a member of the Facebook group since we started a year ago, and in that time, you've provided some great insight to your 3 years on the series. But it's so nice to finally have a chance to chat with you.
Yeah, for sure.
And your timing couldn't be more perfect. We recently reviewed the Winter Soldier 6-issue story arc in Captain America, Volume 5, which was written by Ed Brubaker and, of course, art by you and Steve Epting.
Yep.
So let's start there, the very beginning of your time on the series.
Right.
You've been in the business for a little more than 10 years at this point, paying your dues.
Yeah.
You were working on several cross-gen titles for a few years, and you just got your foot in the door at Marvel with the Spellbinders miniseries, which brings us to 2005. And Ed Brubaker and Steve Epting, they launched a new volume for Captain America, and you get the assignment to ink Epting, starting with issue number 8, which just so happens to be the Winter Soldier Part 1. So tell us how you got that gig.
The thing was, it was when you're a comic book artist in Europe or in England, you basically do everything. You pencil, you ink, you color, sometimes you do the lettering. So you do absolutely everything. And then when I was at CrossGen, I was just brought in as an inker of a Butch guy on Ruse. And the nice thing about CrossGen was that we were all in our little quad areas. And there were 2 teams per area. So ours was the Ruse and Crooks quad. So it was Butch, Laura, and me. And then Epting, Frank Diamata, and Rick Magyar, all in one area, which was great because we all come from a similar kind of illustrative background. And so we would always look at each other's work and swap inspirations and all this kind of thing. And at that point, I didn't really ink Epting, Steve, that much because you're connected to your own inker, but he always liked what I was doing on Butch. And every now and again, we would slip in a panel here and there, which I would ink, just to see what it would look like together. And then when CrossGen fell apart, and I was picking up other work at Marvel. And I think Steve, he came across some family problems and he couldn't keep up with the deadline. And so he wanted me to ink him on the book. And at that time, because I was primarily an inker at CrossGen and therefore primarily known as an inker in the American industry, I was kind of looking to push myself back into the industry as a penciler inker, really. But I helped Steve out on a couple of issues. Then I inked the Lee Weeks one on issue 10, which is never reprinted because it's all part of the House of M stuff. And then they wanted me to carry on inking Steve. And I actually turned them down. I said, no, I appreciate it, but I'm trying to reestablish myself as a penciler inker. And then Brubaker got in touch the next day, and he said, why don't you do alternate arcs and help out Steve whenever he needs the help? And that was perfect, because it was reestablishing me as a penciler inker, and also maintaining that process of inking over Steve as well. So it all worked out perfectly.
Yeah.
And I've been following the book anyway, primarily because I was a fan of both Steve and Ed. And so for me, it was a great opportunity, really.
Right. And by my count, from 2005 to 2008, I think you worked on, like, say, 21 cap issues.
Maybe. You probably know more than me. Yeah.
Well, and it looked like, I would say about half of them you did the pencils, and the other half was strictly inks. And right. And then you did the one cover for 15. So and in some cases you only penciled some pages in an issue and penciled the others.
Yeah, that was after was it 26 to 30, something like that?
Yes, after the
we were doing half issues each at that point.
Yeah. And so that how did that work? Was that challenging doing half issues at that point?
No, I think it worked out really well, because the thing is with the alternate arcs was that I'm a very regular artist. I'll do a pencil and ink page per day. So when you're just kind of concentrating on the alternate arcs, I needed something else to do in the meantime, which enabled me to do the Union Jack stuff and the House of M Avengers stuff. But it was also, when we were doing half issues each, that kind of worked out better because it was more of a steady flow along. And the good thing was with Frank Diamata, he just pulled everything together.
Yeah,
great colorist. And it made everything very smooth looking between the two of us, to the point where some people didn't know who was drawing which issue. And I wouldn't put myself on that level with Steve, but it was Frank who was pulling us both together. So I think it just worked out really well at that point that we were doing the half issues.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Mike, and I think you kind of answered this question, but your pencils seem to mesh so nicely with the things in Geist's, and I wondered if that was by design or if that was just a happy accident.
No, it's just an accident. I mean, that was one of the things we noticed at CrossJam, was that when we were in that quad, we were all coming from a similar influence of backgrounds. The more realistic kind of things, less manga and more illustrative. And so I think that it just fed in naturally. And I guess, Epting was pushing for me, but also I guess the editorial realized that they could meld us together in some way, that it wouldn't be such of a shock to have, two separate artists on there.
Yeah, Rick and I have talked about this so many times, and and I've described it as a symphony. Between the writing and the pencil work and the inks and the colors of the different creative team. It's a symphony. Yeah, beautiful stuff.
Yeah, I was following Ed's work anyway, and it was, I've always followed Ed's work, and it's brilliant stuff. And that's where the basis of it comes from. That's where the strength of it comes from, with Ed's writing, and it was wonderful to work with him as well.
Yeah. So speaking of Ed, and I want to get back to your beginning on the series, which is with that Winter Soldier story. And I know you trust Ed, right? But were you ever worried about bringing back Bucky after all those years that maybe it may not be well received. I mean, you know, he and Uncle Ben were supposed to be like the only two characters to never come back from the dead.
Right. I think I did trust him. Yeah. I think more so, you know, Tom Brevoort has maintained the Marvel continuity for so long, and so if he was willing to accept it, then I think it was okay. I mean, I've read interviews with him where he wasn't willing to accept it at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was trying to convince Ed that it wouldn't work. And then Ed convinced him, you know, this can really work. And so Tom just left it up to him and said, okay, I trust you with this. And so I think that's what it came from, you know. I remember reading the first issue and seeing the hand there, the metallic hand. And I was like, oh, it's Deathlock. But yeah, you know, it wasn't. But I was very excited by that.
Yeah, I got to say, it did work, right?
Right.
I mean, here we are 15 years later, and when you look back on your contribution to the Winter Soldier origin, what are your thoughts? I mean,
most of that was Steve, really. I can't really take any credit for that. I mean, it was pretty much established by the time I was there. I mean, it was 8 issues in, and so a lot of that is Steve. But even so, just being a part of that is fantastic. Just being a part of a character, because it's very difficult to establish long-standing characters in comics. Mm-hmm. You know, you can come up with so many different characters within the context of a story, and they're just around for that story. They don't take off, you know, and it's very difficult to establish something that is going to become part of that Marvel continuity forever. So, mm-hmm. You know, I mean, previously, you know, I've been doing the Spellbinders, and you know, we were thinking, oh, you know, we can have lots of different titles with this. We can have lots of different series, but you know, nothing happened from it. So it's very intriguing, and I know that Winter Soldier had that background of being Bucky, you know, so that was there originally. But even so, it's difficult to bring in a character who's got that staying power.
So that's a great segue, because I want to talk about the first issues of the series that you did pencil. You mentioned you did arcs, right? So 15 through 17 was your first one where you penciled and inked. And it was a great three-part story of Crossbones, breaking the reprogramming did on Cynthia Schmidt, who is the Red Skull's daughter.
Yeah.
And then she's now transferred into Sin, and she and Crossbones go on a killing spree. Right. Now, you and Epting collaborated on designing her look and feel, and you shared one of your designs on the Cap Facebook group, and she's a pretty scary looking girl. Was that fun? And how often do you get to design a new look for a character or an entirely new character?
The way that we approached that was Steve did a design, then I saw that design and came up with a different take upon that same design. So I can't remember if Steve had put the little knives into her bodice. Mm-hmm. So I added those, and the big boots and all this kind of stuff. So it was more of a collaborative effort going on there. I mean, it's always interesting to design new characters and develop those looks. There's a lot of thought process that goes into it, especially with Sin, how she is. She's very active. She's very, you know, kind of, you can almost imagine her kind of jittering in the corner, ready for some action. Oh. So for her to have those knives just ready and waiting on her bodice to throw, I mean, it just made perfect sense, really. Mm-hmm. I don't know how practical it would be in real life, but there's you can kind of play around with that. You know, I mean, you look at any of the costumes, and
Right.
you know, in real life they would just be ludicrous. But it works within the context of that comic, I think.
Yeah. Well, it'd be interesting to see. I mean, because she obviously developed as a character throughout the years, became a bigger part.
Right.
I think it was Fear itself. She was a major character, and I guess it's somewhat of a thrill, being a little bit of a proud moment, seeing some characters that you worked on that and brought back, develop. Yeah. So the next 3-issue story arc you worked on, which was during the Civil War tie-ins.
Right.
And so you penciled and you inked, and there's this great splash page, opening splash page for issue 23.
Right.
And on the front of the building that Bucky's breaking into,
right.
Which is this old brickstone building that's boarded up. And you have the title of the story written on the building in tall letters, and it's The Drums of War, Part 2 of 3. And then you have the creators' names there. And I'm not doing it justice in my description, so please, everybody, check it out. But it's very reminiscent of a Jim Steranko style.
Right.
And was that your influence in that lettering on that building?
Yeah, I mean, Steranko and Will Eisner, basically.
Nice.
Because Eisner was always doing that with the buildings. But I can't recall whether Ed had put it in the script that he wanted that kind of look. It just seemed to scream out for that approach. That's probably one of my favorite opening sequences that I drew on Cap. That whole kind of 4-page sequence with the Winter Soldier breaking into the shield base. I just love that kind of shadow, that creepiness. He's trying to get around different people. I mean, I was drawing it at a time when Butch Geis and Laura Martin and Andrew Hennessy, we were sharing a studio together, and so I was drawing it, and they could just hear me giggling with enjoyment at drawing this thing. And at one point, Butch was saying, feels like you're drawing Nightwing, and I'm like, it's they're kind of similar in look and facial design. But yeah, that opening was just, it was a thrill to do that. I mean, it was so perfectly paced out. It wasn't rushed into,
Right.
Ed made it breathe.
Well, I have to say that is something that's certainly common among all those stories in Volume 5 is the pacing.
Right.
It's just excellent storytelling. So going back to Steranko and Will Eisner, who were your influences?
For me personally, my influences come more from the British end of the market. My favorite comic was 2000 AD, so it's all Brian Bolland, Ian Gibson, Dave Gibbons, Mike McMahon, Steve Dillon. So all these people are kind of the major influences. I would pick up the American reprints in England. But it wasn't until I was about 15 that I really came across the influences from the American market. And you talk about influences, but it's such a subliminal thing that they're not on that, they're not on the surface, they're underneath somewhere. So then you've got people like Perez and Rick Leonardi, Garcia Lopez, and people like this who are just astoundingly good. And Butch himself,
Right.
when X Factor came out, and then the Flash and things like that. So those people. I mean, when Crossbones started, I was originally slated to ink a different artist who's brilliant in his own right. But then I heard that Butch was coming in. I was like, oh no, put me with Butch instead,
Nice.
Because he was one of my heroes growing up. He was one of my influences, which he gets mightily embarrassed about, but that's can't do anything about that.
Hey, not to put you on the spot, Mike, but we're doing that March Madness event in the Captain America comic book fans group, and so you've mentioned that you've been a fan of Cap over the years, and what are your favorite pencilers and writers in the long history of the Cap mythos?
Oh, there's so many, right? That's one of the things.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It is. I think when I was younger, it was most of the reprints in the British stuff were the Steranko things. Also, the Gene Colan Cap stuff as well. I mean, Gene Colan was just magnificent as an artist, especially his Tomb of Dracula stuff. And that was a massive influence for me as well. But I would say if you're going back to that, then those guys. Coming forward to the modern times, I love the John Cassaday stuff as well. When that was relaunched, I absolutely love that work. And then going all the way up to Epting, I thought Epting was a fantastic Cap artist. That's too many.
Yes.
I know. We see this in the group. People who struggle over trying to identify their favorites.
But there's so many good ones.
It's
That's
hard.
the thing.
Yeah. Right.
Well, Bob, you brought it up, so I might as well mention this, right? So, Mike, just want to say congratulations on advancing past round one in our Cap Madness best Cap artist bracket.
I know Carlos, so it's painful for me.
And for those listening who don't know, on our Facebook page, we have 32 Cap artists battling out in a March Madness bracket style.
In
alphabetical order, so
yes.
that makes it fairer.
I thank you. I got a little grief for that. I don't know, but I thought I was being fair. So yes. So fans can go and they can each day vote for a different artist. And by the time this airs, we just finished round one. And so you beat Carlos Pacheco pretty handily.
Oh, okay.
And so for round two, in just a couple of days, you go up against fellow Brit Paul Neary.
Right.
Now, do you have any words for Paul in case he's listening?
Paul was on for a while.
Yes.
On the books. So if he beats me, it's probably fully deserved. I'll go and cry in the corner. But it will probably be fully deserved. But I would like to say that if I had done as many issues as Paul, then there would be no competition.
Yes. Yeah. Nice. Yes. You know what? That is very diplomatic of you. I like that. And Mike's a true gentleman. So let's get back to your time on Cap. So let's talk about what came after your Civil War issues, 25, the death of Steve Rogers. And by the way, for those who didn't know, spoiler alert, Steve was killed back in 2007.
You know something? I didn't know. I'd done the Civil War issues 22 to 24. Epting was drawing 25 on his own, and then I was working on 26. The problem was because of the way Steve McNiven was working, the end of Civil War was delayed by a few months.
Yes.
And so we couldn't put Cap 26 out when we wanted to. Cap 25, we couldn't put that out when we wanted to. So I got the script for 26, and there was Steve Rogers emaciated on the table, and I was in touch with Ed, and I'm like, what's going on? I didn't know anything about Captain America 25. I was just like, I had no idea what was going on. So that was kind of interesting. And then, of course, I had to keep quiet about the whole thing for months because of the delays with the last issue of Civil War coming out.
Yes.
It's an interesting time.
How hard was that? You keeping your silence about something that
I'm
big?
pretty good at keeping secrets, but even so, it was pretty difficult.
Now, do you have, and I'm thinking, all right, do you have, I mean, because some of us comic fans, I mean, outside of this, great Facebook group we have, some of us comic fans, we don't have anybody else to talk to about comics. So I'm just wondering, like, you've got this huge news about Captain America dying, and like, do you have anyone in your family or close friends that you can be like, hey, talk about, and they actually care?
No, I mean, it was more of a case of I just had to keep quiet, because if I told, I mean, I was telling my wife, obviously, but if I told one person and it got out, then
yeah,
who knows what would have happened.
right.
I'm sure Tom Brevoort would have sent the hitmen around or something.
Winter Soldier would have been coming after you.
Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Hey, I've listened to past interviews with you, Mike, and I know that you've said before that as a young lad, you were a fan of Captain Britain.
Yes.
And I am too. That's a great pleasure of mine, and I think a lot of Cap fans aren't all that familiar with Captain Britain's early run, and particularly that arc. I think it was issues 16 through 27 where he teamed up with Cap and went against the Red Skull. And I just absolutely adore that particular story arc. But I'd like to know your thoughts. I mean, if you remember that particular arc.
Well, I tell you what, I mean, when Captain Britain came out, which was 76, I was 6 years old. So this was my comic. This was it. And then was it issue 7 or 8 or something? It opens up with on the cover, it's the two Caps fighting, and my mind was just blown. It was like, this is fantastic. So yeah, I mean, so for me, Captain Britain was just great. I mean, the thing was when he came back in that later storyline. I mean, that was just brilliant as well. I mean, the only kind of strange things were the police, uniforms were a bit off, and I'm sure some of them had guns and things like this. Like,
right?
Oh no!
Yeah. Yeah, it was great. It was a great arc, and I love your Union Jack work. Volume 2 was just phenomenal as well.
Sorry, go on.
No. Go ahead. But after this, I want to ask you what your thoughts are about a future team up between, say, Cap and Captain Britain or Union Jack. I'd love to see that.
Well, the whole Union Jack thing came about because, like I said, I was looking for other things to do because there was not really enough work for me with the alternate arcs solely. So I was actually at a convention and I was talking to Andy Schmidt, who was the editor at the time. And I said to him, how about if we do a Union Jack? Because Union Jack had just been in Captain America at that time with his hockey mask thing on, which we don't talk about that. And I said to Andy Schmidt, I'm like, well, what's the possibility of just coming out of Cap and having a Union Jack miniseries? And he just walked off. And I was like, it wasn't such of a bad idea, right? And then he came back and he had the proposal from Chris Gage in his hands, which he was going to read over that weekend. So I was like, everything was just perfect.
That's synchronicity right there.
Yeah. And so, and especially when they told us that we could just use the normal costume, it was great. That was fantastic. As far as Captain America and Captain Britain, I don't know. I mean, the thing is, I think Union Jack, in a way, is closer to Captain America than Captain Britain. Just from background point of view, coming up from the slums, becoming this hero. I mean, I know that Captain America has a super soldier serum. Union Jack doesn't really even have that. In a way, Captain Britain as Brian Braddock, I mean, that's just, he's almost a god in a way.
Yeah, he's a heavy
Yeah,
level.
yeah. And he comes from an entirely aristocratic background as well. So I think Union Jack is kind of more similar to Captain America than Captain Britain is. But I do like the way that at the moment it seems like Betsy Braddock is taking over the Captain Britain role, which I think is great. So it's a good fit.
So while we're celebrating Cap's 80th anniversary this year, I would be remiss if I did not mention another Cap project you worked on, which was the Captain America 65th anniversary special. Now, granted, it was only 2 pages of the story, but you penciled and inked the last 2 pages of this Ed Brubaker one-shot.
Right.
And I know this because I'm the proud owner of one of these 2 pages.
Excellent.
And there we go. And so, one of the things that I really like it is that it shows Cap and Sharon together, in a quiet moment. Right. And he has his uniform on, but his mask is off. And plus, there's a great image of the Shield helicarrier,
right,
and a majestic mountain scene. So, do you prefer drawing quieter moments or action scenes, and then also indoors versus outdoors? Or do you prefer like a variety to mix things up?
I think a variety. A variety is the best way to go about it. I wouldn't want to do a comic which is entirely action scenes. In the same way, I wouldn't want to do a comic which is entirely just 2 people talking. I think there's a time and place for both of those things, and I think they can be utilized together. I don't think there's a disparity between those 2 things. It's difficult to actually draw quiet moments sometimes, but I have been complimented by a lot of editorial staff that I'm very good at emotive moments with characters. So I guess it's one of my strengths to put that emotion in there. So, I do enjoy drawing that. But I guess a lot of that influence would come, you can look at films, you can look at different things. You look at the interaction of characters on Strangers on a Train in Hitchcock, and it's fantastic. So you just take elements from different things for those different moments. Sometimes, action scenes can be more difficult. You have to emphasize and exaggerate everything. So you're moving away a little bit from the realism of the piece. But I think Epting was great at that. Epting managed to keep that realism within those fight scenes as well. And so, yeah, so like I was saying, I think those things can amalgamate brilliantly. I don't think it should be one or the other,
Right. Yeah. Yep.
I mean, I think another great example of where I think you really melded that well was was that sort of short story in the Captain America Sam Wilson #7.
Right.
I mean, I love that.
Right. That was the 75th anniversary one, right?
I think it might have been. Yeah. It was just that the ballet and Natasha. I
love that story. Done. I love that story. It was that one came about because I was in the Marvel offices, and I was talking to Axel and Tom that I wanted to do a bit more short story stuff. And Tom said to me, "Do you want to do something for the 75th anniversary?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay." Who's writing it? And he said, "Well, you're the first." I just sat down and we just started thinking about it. So you're the first person I asked. Who do you want to write it? I'm like,
nice.
Greg Rucka. And he went, "Okay, we'll get it. We'll get Greg." So, I was actually just before the New York Comic Con. I went up to Greg and I said, maybe we'll get a chance to work together on something. And he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I want to do a Captain America Black Widow story." And the original idea was to approach it in different styles, where Captain America, and you could reflect this through how you were drawing it, where Captain America would see something in black and white, and Black Widow would see it in shades of gray. And so I wanted them to be on a mission together and seeing it from different perspectives. And Greg loved it, but he said, that's not a 6 or 10 page story. It's just like, it's not. So he came up with this other one, and it was a great story. And I read through it, and Cap and Black Widow weren't in costume, but it didn't matter because the story was so great. And there was only one thing I added in that story, because Cap goes up to the balcony to get the guys who are ready to shoot the ballerina. And in the script, he goes in and he just lays into them. And I was like, oh, we got to have a Cap moment there. So on the way up, he bumps into a waiter and takes his tray, his circular tray, and uses that as a shield instead of just going in and laying in it. And so that was my addition to it, just to make it more, more Cap-like, instead of just being any other superhero would have gone in and just laid into them. But yeah, I think it was great. And also, it's from the original art point of view, that thing is loved by a different demographic, because it's quiet, because there's all this setting and everything. It's not scary to look at in a way,
Yeah, no, it's a beautifully done.
Thank you.
Rendered story.
Thank you.
So.
All right, so you had just talked about this particular issue that you had done for the 75 anniversary, and you mentioned that you said, well, and it wasn't, because the way you did it, it wasn't very eerie, it wasn't very scary. So let's talk about something that is pretty eerie and scary, right? Because we're all about Cap, but I want to mention your current series, Swamp Thing, for DC Comics, that you're doing with writer Ram V. Because I have to say, this is some of your best work, and it's a perfect match for the dark, eerie style of the series, and the amount of detail that you're pouring into the work is amazing. What's been the reaction so far?
Oh, it's been great. It's been great. People are loving it. Ram is definitely this kind of writer that gets the poetic notion of the character, which works really well. And Swamp Thing's one of those characters that I think probably any artist would love to work on, especially artists like myself who love to delve into that detail. Sometimes if I need the reference, then I can just go outside. Living in Florida, I can just go into the garden and look at the swamp. And
that's perfect.
And try to get some background there. But it works. It works so well, especially that we're trying to open up the purview of it, that it's not just set in the swamp, that we can do. I mean, the first 2 issues, a lot of them are in the desert, with the Pale Wanderer, who was a great character to, bring in that old Western kind of style. And then we go into the green with issue 3 and 4, so it's more kind of eerily psychedelic. And then we got London in issue 5, and then I'm not even going to say what's in 6, 7, and 8 because it's very exciting. So it's it's really building up. I'm hoping, because the way we're doing it is it's set in seasons. So the first 10 issues of season 1. So I'm hoping that we can get to a season 2.
How's sales been so far? Do you know?
Very good, I think. I mean, I think they were expecting a certain amount, which is kind of here, and they got the amount which is here.
Wonderful.
So
and in case people at home don't know, he just said the expectations were
right.
at a mid-level and the sales were at a high level. So just filling in the blanks there.
Yeah, I mean that description was perfect for radio and podcast. Yeah, I think the first issues were over 45,000. So that's very good. For a Swamp Thing, especially.
Yeah.
And we're hoping. I mean, I'm hoping personally that we can bring them over to 60,000 just through word of mouth, because it is such a brilliant series, and we're both enjoying it so much. I think it would be a shame just to finish on that first season.
Well, and again, your art on it is amazing, and I love the fact that you being in Florida, you can just step outside for inspiration. Now, I guess that I'm just waiting for Bob to ask the question. What is your wife thinking about you going out and getting inspiration about poison ivy?
Yeah, it's not the poison ivy. It's the things that eat you that I think I'd be concerned about. You got to be really careful with your research.
Right.
Well, I was referring to the character poison ivy, but okay.
Well, there's actually 2 versions of poison ivy in this, so it's double trouble, I guess.
Yeah. Yes.
So I didn't want to mention, Rick, but you brought it up and you tagged my name to it. But I was going to say, Mike, you have a certain talent, I think, for drawing women that I very much appreciate.
Okay, thank you.
And Bob's wife is totally fine with that, by the way. So, what else do you have? Do you have anything else going on right now? Did they finally collect the Lois Lane?
Right, Lois Lane was collected into a 12 issue bumper pack thing. And that was great to work with Greg again.
And I guess every once in a while you might be able to do a little work for fans, because I lucked out, and I'm holding up because again for radio this is great, right? Yeah. This awesome Winter Soldier sketch that Mike did for me. So and so if fans want to learn more about you and reach out to you, they can go to mikeperkinsart.com.
Yep.
And I know you have a link on there for commissions. So
I do.
If
I do, but they might take a while at the moment because my workload is crazy at the moment.
Yeah. But you also have a lot of pages on there for sale of previous work as well. So I think there's a couple of Captain America pages left.
Yeah, there's only a couple of those left. Yeah.
I regret missing out on that earlier.
Right. Yeah, I mean the link from my site goes to my art dealer site, which is comicbookartgallery.com, and then from there you can look around and see what there is. Most of my artwork is up on that site. But yeah, I think there's only 2 or 3 cat pages left up there.
Yeah.
From that one. Yeah.
Yep. Well, and then of course they can always find you every once in a while on the Captain America Comic Book Fans Facebook group. And do you want to say anything? Because you got to, it's you versus Paul Neary coming up here pretty soon. Do you want to say anything to the listeners?
Oh,
come on, let's hear some trash talk.
Just vote. Vote how you should vote.
There you go.
Hey.
For me.
Awesome.
No, it's good fun. I'm not expecting to get to the final round, but I am really.
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
Well, we're plugging for you. Mike, this has been a true pleasure. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to speak with us, and we look forward to chatting with you more on the Facebook page.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks a lot.
Well, that was a lot of fun chatting with Mike. Great insight onto his time on the Captain America series. Love talking with him, and he's a super nice guy.
Yeah, I mean, really personable and engaging, and man, he had a lot of great insights into the relationship between art and writing, and man, that's great stuff, man. I love listening to him, guys like him talk.
Absolutely. So let's talk about just a quick plug. Next episode we've got coming out is going to be our Falcon and Winter Soldier reaction show, right? So we've got this will be reacting to episode 4. So that'll come out on Sunday, April 11th. And then next week for episode number 25, we have the winner of our contest coming on, Mr. James Foley. So that'll be a nice talk with him, get his background on why he's a Captain America fan, where he got started, and also the topic that he wanted to focus on was the Captain storyline, right, from the time where Mark Grunwald story, which is very lengthy. We're not going to get into every single issue, but starting where Steve gave up his uniform and shield. To the time John Walker took over, and to the time where Steve was known as the Captain, and then ultimately him taking back the shield. So that'll be fun. We haven't talked on that story yet, and so I'm looking forward to that. Yeah,
I mean that story is such a such an important part of the Captain America mythos. I'm surprised we haven't talked about it yet, but it's great that James wants to do it, and James is a great guy, and this is I think going to be just a really fun conversation.
Absolutely. Well, as always, Bob, I've enjoyed wrapping cap with you.
All right. Let's do it again sometime soon.
Okay, he's Bob Lucius. I'm Rick Verbanis, and you've been listening to the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast.